Welcome to a journey back in time, to a city of incredible beauty and heartbreaking struggle. We are traveling to Dublin in the 1700s, a place that was full of striking contrasts. In this era, Dublin was not just a provincial town, it was the second largest and most important city in the entire British Empire, rivaled only by London itself. By the middle of the century, the population had swelled to nearly 150,000 people. It was a time of massive change, where grand new streets lined with elegant red brick houses were rising up alongside ancient, crumbling medieval cathedrals. Tremendous wealth flowed through the city streets, driven by a booming trade in linen, dark porter beer, and agricultural goods. However, this wealth was not shared by everyone. While the rich danced in ballrooms, extreme poverty gripped vast areas of the city, creating a divide that defined daily life. In this video, I'm using modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life. This technology allows us to shift our perspective, change camera angles, and move through these 18th century scenes in ways the original artists could never have imagined. So, let us step into the past, starting with the beating heart of power in the city. Our tour begins with a view of Dublin Castle in the early 1700s. The great fortress looms large in the background, a symbol of authority that had stood for centuries. You can see that its towers and walls are still medieval in their bones, heavy and defensive, but they have been softened with new, fashionable Georgian facades, following recent rebuilding projects. In the foreground, look at the horse-drawn coaches rolling across the cobblestones of the courtyard. They're guarded by soldiers dressed in bright red coats, standing stiff and alert. If you were standing there, the air would carry the heavy, distinct scent of coal smoke drifting from countless chimneys, mixed with the damp, salty smell rising from the nearby river Liffey. Servants are hurrying back and forth, carrying trays of food and messages, while gentlemen in white powdered wigs and silk coats stand in small groups, discussing the intense politics of the day. Daily life in this castle revolved around the court of the Viceroy, the King's representative in Ireland. It was a world of lavish balls, formal receptions, and endless social climbing among the ruling class, known as the Protestant ascendancy. Yet, there is a tension simmering just beneath this polished surface. The strict laws of the time, known as the penal laws, excluded Catholics, who made up the majority of the population, from holding power or owning significant property. This breeds a quiet, deep resentment that you can almost feel in the atmosphere. The castle mattered because it was the absolute seat of British rule in Ireland, the centre of all administration and ceremony. Over time, fires and neglect would force more renovations, but in the 1700s, it stood strong as the ultimate symbol of control. It is remarkable to think that this same complex survives today as a government building and a major tourist site. You can actually walk into these very courtyards where 18th century life once played out. Moving just a short distance away, we come to College Green and the magnificent Irish Houses of Parliament. By the mid-1700s, this area was the showpiece of the city. The elegant Parliament House, which was completed in 1739, dominates the scene. Its massive classical columns gleam white against the grey Irish sky, designed to impress anyone who walked by. On one side, you can see the gates of Trinity College, with students in long, flowing academic gowns crossing the uneven cobblestones on their way to class. The scene is noisy and chaotic. Carriages clatter loudly past, their iron wheels grinding on the stone, while street vendors call out their wares, selling everything from newspapers to fruit. The smell of fresh bread baking in nearby ovens mingles with the earthy smell of horse manure and the morning river mist. This location was the gathering place for the city's elite. Lawyers, members of parliament, and wealthy landlords would meet here for the sessions of the Irish Parliament. However, it wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes, the crowds outside would swell with angry protesters upset over trade restrictions or unpopular new laws, adding a layer of friction to the orderly stone facade. This place mattered deeply because it was the hub of Anglo-Irish political life. It was here that famous historical figures like Henry Grattan made passionate speeches pushing for greater independence for Ireland. However, this golden era of politics would end. After the Act of Union in 1801, Ireland's Parliament was dissolved and the building lost its purpose, eventually being sold and turned into a bank. Today, this same stretch of College Green remains a lively area for pedestrians, still framed by that grand columned entrance that reminds us of its former glory. Directly across from the Parliament stands Trinity College as it looked in the 1750s. The grand gateway and the bell tower loom over the foreground, serving as a barrier between the noise of the city and the world of learning inside. In the background, you can see scholars strolling through the quiet quadrangle. The old library building peeks through the architecture, its shelves already heavy with ancient, priceless volumes. The sounds here are different. Instead of street noise, the sounds of lectures echo softly from open windows, mixed with the chirping of birds in the great trees. Students gather in corners to debate philosophy and theology, while porters hurry along carrying messages for the professors. The air here holds the faint, dry aroma of ink, old leather and dust. Daily life at Trinity pulsed with intellectual energy, but it also mirrored the class divides of the city. You could tell a student's background by his clothes. The wealthy students wore fine fabrics, while the poorest scholars, who worked to pay for their education, wore plainer garb. There were also tensions regarding religion, as Catholics were strictly barred from attending the university until reforms were passed much later. Trinity mattered because it was Ireland's leading university, the place where the elite were trained, and where human knowledge was preserved. Although many of the buildings would endure fires and changes over the centuries, the core of the campus survives. Today, it remains a world-renowned university, and visitors can still walk into that same library to see the Book of Kells, standing in the very spot where scholars stood 300 years ago. We now move deeper into the medieval part of the city to view Christ Church Cathedral from the west. The sharp medieval spire and rough stone facade fill the frame, looking ancient even back then. Dame Street stretches out into the background, a busy artery of the city. You can see worshippers dressed in period clothing entering the heavy wooden doors, while street sellers aggressively hawk fish and fruit to passers-by right on the church steps. In the engravings from this time, the interior always glows with warm candlelight, but outside, the reality was grittier. The smell of river mud from the Liffey and baking bread prevailed over the incense. The bells would ring out across the city for services, drawing the Anglican community to prayer. However, there was friction here too. The cathedral was actually falling into decay in parts during the 1700s, with roof collapses threatening the stability of the entire building. It also stood as a symbol of the established state church in a city that was overwhelmingly Catholic, creating a social divide. Despite this, it mattered as one of Dublin's oldest religious centres, a symbol of continuity that had survived wars and sieges. Major restorations in the 19th century would eventually save it from ruin. Remarkably, this cathedral stands today, much as it did then. A site where you can still attend services and touch the history in the stones. Not far away, we find a view of St. Patrick's Cathedral in the mid-1700s. The towering spire, which was added in 1749, rises sharply against the cloudy sky, dominating the skyline. In the foreground lies the surrounding green park. This is the world of Jonathan Swift, the famous author of Gulliver's Travels, who served as the dean here until 1745. He would have walked these very grounds, frustrated by the politics of the day. You can see clergy in long robes moving about with purpose, while beggars gather at the gates hoping for alms. The air here carries the smell of church incense drifting out the doors, mixed with the earthy, damp scent of the nearby park, and the poor neighbourhoods that press close against the cathedral walls. Daily life here was a mix of high worship and necessary charity. Swift famously founded the nearby St. Patrick's Hospital in 1746 to care for the mentally ill, recognizing a desperate need in the city. Disease and poverty were never far away, and the mortality rate among the poor in this area was heartbreakingly high. This cathedral mattered as a spiritual anchor. ND is crowded with ships, their sails furled tight, as merchants oversee the unloading of linen, timber, and coal. Warehouses rise up along the banks, with wooden cranes swinging heavy cargo onto the docks. The sounds are industrial and loud, ropes creaking under strain, sailors shouting instructions, and the water lapping against the stone walls. The river carries the strong, pungent smell of tar, raw fish, and damp stone. Trade was the engine that drove the city's economy, but the river brought risks too. Floods were common, fires on the docks could be devastating, and crime was rampant in the shadows of the warehouses. The ports mattered because they were the lifeline of commerce, connecting Dublin to the rest of the world. Later bridges and buildings would reshape this scene completely. Today, the quays remain busy, though now they are filled with modern traffic and tourism rather than sailing ships. Our tour takes us next to Henrietta Street in the early 1700s. This was a street of grand, palatial houses, wide and imposing. Coaches are waiting outside the doors, while wealthy residents in finer tracts step out to begin their day. The air holds the scent of expensive perfume and the inevitable coal smoke. Servants bustle around the entrances, polishing brass and sweeping steps, while the elite stand on the floor discussing affairs of state. This street represents the early prosperity of the Georgian era. It mattered because it was Dublin's very first major development, designed specifically for the aristocracy. It sets the standard for luxury living. However, over time, the story of this street became tragic. As the wealthy moved away in the 19th century, these grand palaces were carved up into tenements, housing dozens of poor families in a single room. Today, some of these houses have been restored, serving as a haunting reminder of faded grandeur and the shifting fortunes of the city. To truly understand the city, we must see the contrast. This view shows the area known as the Liberties in the late 1700s. Here, narrow, twisting lanes and weavers' workshops fill the scene. You can see figures working at looms in open doors, trying to catch the fading light. Children play in the mud of the unpaved streets, while vendors call out trying to sell cheap food. The smell here is heavy and unpleasant. The scent of wet wool, harsh dyes, and poverty hangs in the air. This was a dangerous place. Gangs like the Liberty Boys patrolled these streets, often clashing violently with rival gangs from other districts. Disease spread like wildfire in the crowded, damp homes. Yet, this area mattered immensely because the textile trade here was a huge part of Dublin's economy. The people here worked incredibly hard despite the extreme hardship. Reforms and slum clearances would come much later to change this landscape. Today, parts of the Liberties retain their historic, independent feel, though the area has been much transformed. Finally, we end our tour at St. Stephen's Green in the 1700s. The large park stretches wide, bordered by a ditch and trees, with elegant houses surrounding it. Gentlemen ride horses along the perimeter track, while ladies stroll along the gravel paths known as the Bow Walk. Ducks glide peacefully on the central pond. The air smells of fresh grass and flowers, a welcome relief from the city smells. Social display thrives here. It was the place to see and be seen, away from the grit of the river and the markets. Yet, the class divides were clear. This was a space for the respectable and the wealthy. The green mattered as a gentle escape, a piece of the countryside brought into the city. It was later open to all citizens, thanks to the Guinness family. Remarkably, this park remains a peaceful oasis in modern Dublin, a gift from the past to the present. As we step back from these scenes, the past feels remarkably close. We can sense the elegance and the hardship, the ambition of the builders, and the struggle of the poor. Dublin, in the 1700s, was a city in the process of remaking itself, full of beauty and tension that still echoes in the streets today. If there is another city, another historical moment, or a specific scene you would like to see brought to life in this way, please let me know in the comments below. Again, thank you so much for watching and traveling through time with me.